Right, well, look, let's just finish then on a little bit of economic news. And you wanted to comment on the inflation situation.
Yeah, it seems that the fight against inflation is now going on a more worldwide scale. So much of it that we hear is on a U.S. basis. What is the Fed going to do? Oh, Jerome Powell, he's had another epiphany, et cetera. And the sub story is the Fed was going to raise rates again for the umpteenth time and decided just for now they're not going to do it. And so here's the headline: the world's fight against inflation is about to get more serious and more painful. The part they never tell you is that the banksters are fighting the very inflation that they create. As David Scott and I talk about from somewhat different perspectives regularly on this show. Reading a little bit of this CNN story, that was a CNN headline. Here's the story: central bankers across the globe are delivering a message. They want to win the fight against inflation. And here's from your side of the pond: if we don't raise rates now, and this sounds just like Jerome Powell, high inflation can stay with us for longer. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said after raising interest rates unexpectedly by half a percentage point there in the UK on Thursday, even though inflation is slowing in many countries, they say, after more than a year of interest rate hikes, it remains above the 2% level that many central banks are targeting. The 2% level is sort of the sacrosanct figure that they always use. Much could be said here. I'll just read a small part of this, a little small print. My other monitor went down. Central bankers have a very delicate balancing act. For a while, it seemed as though they could raise rates without significantly hurting their economies. But now that time is this is all catching up with them, in other words. And with inflation higher than they'd like it to be, the risk of doing too much to get inflation down is on par with not doing enough. So the part they're not telling you is that raising interest rates itself is potentially and often actually inflationary. The one theory is that if they raise rates and rates are prohibitively high, then people will take out fewer car loans. They won't get that mortgage, and there'll be less spending in the borrowing sense, and that will cool inflation. But lines of credit for manufacturing, lines of credit for all sorts of businesses have to be maintained for those businesses to stay in business, and they will borrow at higher rates. And people have variable rate mortgages in the United States. They're not all fixed rates. And higher credit card premiums, higher credit card interest rates are almost inevitable. And these costs from the business sector will be passed on to the end consumer in what's called cost push inflation. The other kind of inflation that David talks about when you print too much currency versus the inventories, that's demand pull inflation. There's two kinds of inflation. So the story behind the story is the banks act like inflation is this monster coming from a cave that they have no connection to, when in fact they create it by raising rates that are a cost to doing business, that are pushed onto the end consumer, or by printing too much money in some instances. And then they say, how are we going to fight this terrible scourge of inflation? Well, the way to fight it is to get the central banks out of the business of creating money for nation states so money can be created interest-free and debt-free and is not born as debt. Ultimately, that's the answer. But again, they play this switcheroo, this mind game, and tell you that they're trying to kill a dragon that they claim they have no connection to, when in fact the dragon comes right out of their zoo. So that's just something that needs to be clarified at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mark. And with that, we are out of time. So I'm going to say thank you very much to Vanessa and to Mark for joining us today. I think that has been very interesting news. We're going to discuss more of these issues on Extra in a couple of minutes. If you're a UK Column member, please do join us for that. But we will be back for UK Column News on Wednesday at 1 p.m. As usual, and hopefully we'll see you there. But do join us for the interview at 1 p.m. tomorrow at ukcolumn.org/live as usual. Okay, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.